Adventures in Supply Chain podcast is pleased to announce the Coronavirus and Supply Chain series to help our communities with the insights of outstanding leaders in supply chain and in other critical functions. These challenging times are also for transformations and opportunities. We will get through this together, and we will make it happen. Laura Dao is the business director at China Performance Group, a leading company with over 40 years of experience in sourcing from China. In her role, Laura leads international business development, creates or adjusts processes to reach optimal potential, identifies new business opportunities, and leverages existing ones while building and maintaining rapport with prospects and clients. Laura holds a master's degree in international studies, politics, from the John Hopkins University Paul H. Nitze School of Advanced International Studies. The program was conducted in Mandarin Chinese. Laura's bachelor's degree is in economics, legal studies from the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. Laura also has great volunteer experience, including her work for the Peace Corps as an English teacher. Other volunteering causes are children activities through Kiwanis International and park restoration activities through New York Cares. And now with you, your host, Marcia, and her amazing guest, Laura Dao, to talk about sourcing in China.
Welcome, Laura. A pleasure to have you. We are going to learn about a topic that is a hot topic in supply chain, that is sourcing from China. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Marcia. Good to see you again.
Of course, my pleasure. And can you tell us what your company does and your role and about your experience that I know that you lived in China?
Sure. Okay. So I guess maybe it'll be easiest to backtrack. I'll start with my experience, and then we can go to the company and my role there. I started as a Peace Corps volunteer in China, actually, in 2006, from 2006 to 2008. And I taught English and American culture. And that's where I really became very familiar with Chinese culture and the language. And I really threw myself into, studying the language and the culture. And then later on, I actually did graduate school there. And so I was in a program with the Hopkins Nanjing Center. And I did grad school there and from 2010 to 2012. And I've been working on, China-related issues since basically Peace Corps. And so my work has shifted over the years, but now, I'm with CPG. I've been here for China Performance Group. I've been here for 2.5 years, and I am really focused on business development, business growth here in the United States. We are a company that's been around for a long, long time in China, since 1978. And now we are really focused on our U.S. presence and growing this presence here. So that's what I do.
Perfect.
Yes.
And company now?
Okay, so China Performance Group, it's a good question. I think that many people don't really understand exactly what we do, so it's really good to be able to explain it. So we work with companies all over the world of all sizes that buy products from China. And so as with sourcing anything, when you're sourcing from a foreign country, it's beneficial to have a support structure on the ground, at best, a team on the ground to support all aspects of the sourcing process. And that can be difficult for some companies, that it can be difficult to open a China office or to have your own team from afar. It raises concerns about managing from the other side of the world and cost and things like that. So what we do at China Performance Group is we provide a China office and a China team. So it's a professional sourcing team. They've been doing this again for many, many years, a dedicated sourcing team for clients, and essentially a branch office in China. So a China office that will act as an extension of our client's home office, wherever it is. It's in the United States or UK. And it's a really cost efficient, low-cost solution, actually, for two reasons. The main reason is that, our team is efficient. They've been doing this forever. And so sourcing is their expertise, whereas some people might try to do it as part of their whole, all their business, one piece of what they do. Our team has been doing this forever, just this piece. And so the other point is also that companies buy just the resources they need. So you can purchase, 20 hours a month of a China sourcing team, and that's it. And there's no additional costs. So that's what we do. We make that possible. And of course we have, procedures in place. We have a focus on mission. We are mission and results driven. And so we start every month with a very clearly defined mission that is agreed upon by our client and our China team. So that really dictates what the team does. And we have, various other processes and procedures in place to manage the process. So you're getting the most out of buying from China.
Yes, no, that's great. Yes, and you are right, because some companies may feel intimidated from what sourcing from China implies, right? And both cultures, how everything works. So that's fantastic. And from your experience and the team doing this, what are the products or categories of products that you think companies have a great advantage from sourcing from China?
So there's many categories, many products that, it's beneficial to source from China. I think I can think of sort of four main categories of product: complex products, which I'll explain, technology, raw materials and chemicals, and then also things like apparel and footwear. And so I think most of that is self-explanatory, but when I say complex products, I mean more labor-intensive products, things that, such as consumer packaged goods. It could be machinery or automotive, equipment, things like that. Technology is a wide range, from things like our phone and computers to simple things like remote controls. And then for, apparel and footwear, it also tends to be things that are, require more, that are more labor intensive, fine products, higher quality, that is best in China because of the sophistication of the supply chain. And then the last piece really is the raw goods. And so, China is still a good source for these raw materials. Companies that go outside of China often discover that their raw materials are being still purchased in China. And so it makes sense to buy raw materials and chemicals and those sorts of things in China.
Yes. Actually, I'm familiar, in particular, when you mention chemicals or raw materials, in plastics, all those kind of groups. I know that the companies are buying from China. But what surprised me a little bit is about technology. That of course, there are purchases from there. So one concern when you mention technology that many companies face is about the protection of their intellectual property. So how can you address that concern?
It's a really good question, a concern that deserves attention. I think that, intellectual property is a problem everywhere. And I think that since so much sourcing happens in China tends to be a focus. There are ways to protect yourself when doing technology in China and all products. And so there's really sort of 6 things that can be done to protect your intellectual property. I'm just speaking generally, there's other things, but I just want to highlight sort of 6 different things. And done together, they can offer a great deal of protection. So really it starts with, one of the first things is a patent, and that's pretty straightforward. But what people forget is that, you need a patent for every country in which you're going to sell your product. And so a patent in the United States is not going to protect you in other countries that you're selling. Also, patents are easy to sort of circumvent. You can make small changes to the design of something and then easily, avoid infringement. So that's something to be aware of. A patent is maybe just the first step. In addition to that, there's copyright. And so to protect brands and content, copyright, registering a copyright, which is pretty straightforward. In addition to that, there's these formal agreements with suppliers and manufacturers. And so what is most common, people are most familiar with, is an NDA or an NNN these days, which actually stands for non-disclosure, non-use, and non-circumvention. And that's sort of more comprehensive than an NDA. And there's experts in China that can help you write these NNN agreements with suppliers so that they are enforceable in China. And that might require, a team on the ground to do some translation, but, it is helpful.
Yeah.
There's a couple more. So in addition to these NDA and NNN agreements, there's mold and tooling agreements, which I think a lot of companies forget to do, but, it's another formal agreement with a supplier. And so a tooling agreement, there's a few important components to include that in the agreement, such as, it should stipulate that the supplier will only use your tooling with the company that's in the agreement. They will not use your molds for other parties. That's important. And it's also important in the agreement, that the company owns the tooling. If they wanted to move suppliers, they could go elsewhere, pick up their tooling and go to a different supplier. So let's see, I think that's 4. We have 2 more things that can be done. Another thing that can be done to protect intellectual property is if it's a complex product with many different components, you can produce different components at different suppliers. So that is, not one supplier does everything. That's another way. And then the last piece is really about trust and relationship with a supplier and finding the best fit supplier for your needs and a mutually beneficial relationship. And so if a supplier knows that, you want to build a lasting relationship and you'll have repeat orders and increased volume, they have a much, greater incentive to protect your intellectual property, and they're not going to want to give it to their competitor. But if they feel it's going to be just a one-time order, they might be more likely to try to, knock off your goods. So that's important. At the same time, business as usual, you don't want to rely solely on one supplier, because then, that supplier can sort of take advantage. And so it's good to be, open and transparent. The supplier should know that you have other options, that a company has other options. So those are the things that can be done. And it's challenging and complex. If none of those work, the Chinese court system is better at dealing with intellectual property. However, if you get to that point, it's not really a good sign. It can be very, very costly. And so hopefully you can do these other things first and avoid having to go to court.
Yes, the points that you provided are great, in particular about the mold, because sometimes I was talking to you about those, for example, the plastic cups, right, for the canisters, now that they are very popular, right, the disinfecting wipes.
Right, yeah.
So they need to open a mold, because sometimes what they are using in China is different from what we are using, in particular for the cup of the canisters. And we go ahead and we ask them to open mold, and there's no agreement. So you are right. There are many actions that we can take to prevent from going to court, right? That in any case, you mentioned to get to the Chinese courts, but we can also have in the contract a U.S. court as well, right? But great points to prevent us from getting into that situation that we don't want to be, right?
If possible, definitely. And again, it's not just China, it's everywhere. And if you have the best product, the best quality, we always like to say the best place to take on a competitor is in the market. And that's why people go to China for the competitive advantage. So, all those things coupled with a great product at a great price, it's winning solution.
Yes.
Most of the time. Yeah.
Yes. And you also mentioned quality. I have heard another concern about quality. They say, okay, the parts are fine, like a batch is fine, but then the next one is not so good. So it's like they don't have a solid quality control. So how do you address that concern about quality?
So many ways. To start, our philosophy is that prevention is better than a cure, and so really, I think that people forget that quality control happens at the very beginning stages of production, the first stages. And so, in the very beginning stages, communication, really clear communication about your quality requirements, need to be conveyed, and your supplier needs to own these quality requirements, needs to agree to them. And then documenting all those requirements that you have upfront. And so we have at CPG, we have a couple, many processes and a few actual official documents that we rely on to ensure quality. And it starts at the very initial stage with verifying and qualifying suppliers. Are the suppliers able to meet your basic requirements for quality? And then the next stage after that is what we call a product specification sheet. And so when we seek bids or quotes for certain products, when we help clients do this, we have a product specification sheet, a PSS, finalized, a very detailed PSS finalized before we do that. And so then we go to various different suppliers that are qualified to produce this product, and they're all looking at the same PSS. And so they are looking at what we have specified, for quality requirements and for production, and they're bidding to that and agreeing that they can provide that. And then at the next stage, you'll go to samples. And then after samples, we also do something called an inspection specification sheet. So what do you need to do to the product? If you have these glasses here, every single stage of the process that needs to happen to inspect those goods to make sure they will conform to your quality standards. And so those are the two official documents that we use all the time, the PSS and the ISS. And these documents actually are attached to our purchase orders. They are attached to a formal purchase order with the company and a supplier. And so they become part of that formal agreement, and it provides recourse, should issues arise. And again, this is about prevention. And so when you do this up front, issues rarely arise, but should they arise, companies have a recourse. They have, it's documented that the supplier agreed to do XYZ. And so they have, something that they can do, and they can, sometimes receive, a refund or whatever it may be.
Yes, no, that's great. And I like that you focus on prevention, right?
Yeah.
It's better to prepare than to repair. So yes,
that's another way to say it. Definitely. Yes.
Yes, and also in case that something happens, you have a team in China, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's different than sometimes when we do sourcing or companies do sourcing is from here, and we don't have any physical presence in China. So that is a challenge, right?
It is a challenge, and you bring up a really good point, because we do have a team there, and initially with, a large team, so there, it makes a difference. But initially when doing, conducting inspections or qualifying a factory, we will send our team. We will recommend to our clients that it's best that we go, CPG team members go to do the inspections, or qualification of a factory or to inspect goods. But once the standards are in place, that PSS and the ISS, and once we've gone there once to the factory and done the inspection once, we often recommend, you can use a third party that we will help manage, in China. And so it's even more cost effective then. So it is very helpful to have, a team on the ground that can either do the inspections for you or manage another party to do them.
Great.
Yeah.
And during these times that now we are post-COVID.
Right. Post, I don't know. Are we?
Yes, we still don't know, right?
Right.
If they're post or during, or we will have a second wave. That is uncertain. But there has been controversy,
mm-hmm.
and talk about reshoring, what companies are going to do, if they are going to continue manufacturing in China, or even if they are going to source from China or move the supplier base to a country that is in Asia but different than China. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, also really important. And it's something, even before planning to do this, this interview, we did a blog on this recently. And so it's on our website. So we recognize that this is a really important topic.
Yeah.
And reshoring or producing locally in your home country is really always a great idea if you have the means. You can manage locally, faster shipping times. You don't have to deal with tariffs, all these things. You have the made in the USA or wherever label on it. And so it's wonderful. And if a company can do it, we always recommend it. It's also more expensive, more expensive to do so locally generally. And when people compare the costs of, producing locally or buying from another country, I think that they tend to be a little bit simplistic about it and think about cost of labor, tariffs, cost of raw materials and things like that. But it's actually quite complicated, and there's many different factors that need to be considered. And so things like the capital expenditure to mass produce a product is much cheaper in China. So we always recommend to do locally if possible, but I think that companies will really want to weigh their options and see what makes sense to them. With COVID and with what's going on with tariffs, there is a lot of the politics of sourcing from China is a little bit more tricky and a little bit sensitive these days. Mm-hmm. And we try to just stay in our lane and do what we do best. So our clients are looking for a competitive advantage in China. The suppliers that we work with are just really trying. Many of them are private and just trying to make a living. And so we encourage buying or manufacturing in China when it makes sense, but it's not the only way.
Yes, right. And Laura, you were mentioning about the cost, that is a great advantage, and of course it is, right?
Right.
In particular, if there are no challenges with the freight, with the shipping, that kind of products. But I have also found advantages with the lead times. I continue with that example with the disinfecting wipes. They can produce at a lower cost and with shorter lead times. I'm talking about, like, let's say a month or less than a month, 3 weeks. And in the US, most of them are over 6 weeks, 8, 12. There were some companies that they just cannot keep up with the high demand. So that's another factor that sometimes is cost and some other advantages. And
yeah.
So, yes, and another point that I would like to mention is that I have read the blog post and also other publications. And it seems like even there was a lot of this talk about reshoring, companies are not doing that. It's like 70% the statistics indicate that they are going to stay there. It's not so easy, like from one day to another, to change. And as we were talking, China offers great advantages. So now my next question to you is, what are China's competitors? For example, India or Vietnam, and what advantages and disadvantages China has with respect to them?
Right. So in terms of, let's just talk competitors, strict competitors, maybe using the United States as an example, the strongest local competitor would be, Mexico, probably. In Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Bangladesh, India, lots of, Vietnam, Pakistan, lots of countries. But you need to look into specifics. And so what I found actually, which is interesting, is that there's talk about reshoring now or moving supply chain out of China, but this actually started 2 years ago when the tariffs, the talk of tariffs first started. And so many companies did move to other countries in Asia, and the advantages of doing that, if it's not a very complex product, if it's a T-shirt or something quite simple, it might make sense to go to these other Asian countries, and that's just because the supply chain is less developed there, and so labor costs are lower, and that makes sense. Something to keep in mind is that, what you save in labor costs by going to a different country, because labor is more expensive in China, you might lose in efficiency or productivity. Yeah. And then also it's good to keep in mind that raw materials, I mentioned raw materials before, many of these raw materials actually come from China originally. And so again, you have to look at the whole supply chain from beginning to end, and you might be saving on labor costs, but paying more in other areas. That's not to say that for, simple T-shirts and, bedding and things like that. Sometimes wood is good from other countries, not always so great in China, depending on the kind. Bamboo is good in China, but other fine woods, maybe not so much. So those are the advantages of other countries, an advantage for simpler products that require less, complicated design and things like that. For China, I think it's, I think I've pretty much covered it. The supply chain is very mature, and it's very sophisticated, and it has this depth. And so you can do different, you can do very, very intricate products, and then you can do very simple products, but then it also has this breadth. And so we work with companies that do machinery to crystals, to apparel, to paper products. It really can do everything. And Chinese people, and Marcy, I think you've been there, their work ethic is amazing. And so the productivity and the efficiency is just unbelievable. And so you're getting a lot for your money there. And yeah.
Yes, you are right. This is different, right? The communication with China that with different Asian countries. So they are practically all the time. They are available. So they are very responsive.
Very responsive, yes.
So what advice would you give to companies that are looking into sourcing from China or starting from China? What element should they be considering?
Really good question. So I think, there's many ways to buy from China, and it really depends on the volume that you're doing. And so there's factors to consider. If you're doing a very, very small volume, you want to consider whether or not it makes sense to hire a team. If you're going to do larger volumes, I think in general, it makes sense to have a team on the ground to set up this foundation for long-term growth. And so that's the first thing. Secondly, I would look at different things depending on the company. If a company has been buying from China for many years, and many of our clients do, they've been doing it for maybe 20 years and have this support structure in place. We just like to ask questions, which is important for all of us to do all the time. Are you getting the best prices? And how do you know? Does your team do price benchmarking, monthly or quarterly? Do you have reports to show this? Is it the best quality? Also, how do you know? Can you do better, in terms of all these different factors? And to really ask them to look at things such as, communication. Is communication super fluid and open? Is there full transparency? Do you know exactly what you're paying for? Everything, from the little details. Do you have control? If you've been doing this for a while, you'd think that you want full control over all the decisions. Do you have that? And those are the things that we think people should consider, who've been doing this for a long time. Ask those key questions. I think the last one would be, are your interests aligned? So are you working with whoever you're working with, a support structure and the suppliers, do you have aligned interests? And sometimes when you ask those questions, you'd be surprised. A lot of people might say everything's going well, but they have no proof. They have no way of verifying they're getting the best price. No way of verifying that there's not something better out there. And so that's, for those companies, it's about optimization of what they're already doing. For companies that are just starting out, the fundamental questions about what is the product and what is the volume going to be? And does it make sense to buy this product from China? Or is it something that can be produced locally? Or is it something that, you can produce or buy better from another country? And one simple way to do this, and check this, we have things such as Alibaba now. And so you can easily go onto Alibaba in a few seconds, determine, oh, wow, this product is something that is made in China. And if I bought directly from suppliers as opposed to Alibaba, I might do better. Then, might save. At the same time, if it's your first time buying and you don't plan to buy a lot, again, it's just one-time order, it might not make sense to go through the process of setting a team up, even though it can be pretty simple, depending on who you go with. It might make sense just to do one order and then reassess next year. If you have plans to grow and scale, that's when you really want a foundation in place. And it's the initial stages, the very, the attention to detail and the communication and the initial stages to identify suppliers that fit your exact needs, finalize those spec sheets. So you're getting quotes, apples to apples, and you're not getting quotes for totally different things. The inspection specification sheets, the quality assurance, all that foundation that needs to be set up in the beginning that, if you want to stay in China for a while, it's best to really invest in a team or an office. So.
Yes, great. Yes, and I remember that you mentioned that the requirements need to be clear and consider the total cost of ownership, all the aspects. So, yes.
Yeah.
So I really like all the insights that you have provided, Laura, and also they are actionable, because when I ask you about IP and quality, so thank you so much for that. It's very helpful and useful.
Of course, yes. And I think, thank you. It's really great to chat with you. It's great to collaborate. I think, we're doing very similar things, and it's great that we can, work together on this. And you're right, it is all actionable. We're not talking amorphous ideas. It's actually pretty straightforward. But you'd be surprised how many people don't do it. So it's fun for us, because it's something that is easy for us and complicated for others, and it works.
Yes. No, so thank you so much for being.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
It's a pleasure. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you so much.